Morning again. If you want to open up to Ephesians chapter 4, that's going to be where our text is going to start this morning. I need you to be patient with me for just 1 second. I got to do some setup stuff here. Instead of PowerPoint, I'm just going to throw my text up on the screen behind me. So hopefully it works. Isn't that pretty? Sorry I can't get that text bigger for you. As much as I can do. I want to say a lot of things, but my time is short and I don't want to keep you all afternoon. I would like to have enough time to get back to Ryan's songs because we're going to talk about walking with the Lord. And then I really like how he does this. After we talk about it and it's fresh in our mind, then we're going to sing about it. And it makes it so much, I think, realer whenever we can sing about it when we're all thinking the same thoughts and it's all in our same head. But one thing that Mike said, I appreciate especially his last comments about the contribution. And one of the things that he said was when he was reading from Paul in Philippians, that Paul said, I have enough. And that's Becky and I. So thank you for that. We have enough. And also, one thing that he did not mention, he read it, but he didn't mention, was all of you who raised your hand, who have, given me opportunities to teach and study with you and with the people connected with you and all of that sort of thing. If you go back to that text, you'll notice what Paul said, that goes on your account. And so that's one of the things that I'm very grateful for, and I hope that you're mindful of when we support my family and other preachers. It goes on your account. And so thank you for that. Okay, I listened to Nick's sermon last Sunday morning where he talked about Ephesians 1, 2, and 3, and he started and he said, this is a theological, there is a lot, he wasn't joking, a lot of theology in those 3 chapters. And one of the things that he talked about was the mystery of Christ and how the mystery is that we can all be a part of this family of God. And in his conclusion, when he was wrapping everything up, he used this word. He said, these are the consequences of being a part of the family of God. And then at one point he said there are some implications of being a part of the family of God. I latched onto those 2 words because that's what I'm going to be talking about this morning. I'm going to be talking about Ephesians 4, 5, and 6, the practical section of Ephesians, and we're going to be talking about the consequences, or I like this better, the implications of being a part of the family of God. Ryan's songs this morning had to do with walking. And so if you will do this with me real quick, you'll see this theme all throughout Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 1. This is the heading for the whole thing that we're going to be looking at. It's right above. I'm not going to turn and look to all of these on that screen right now, but this is the theme. Paul says, therefore, based upon all of the theology that I did in Ephesians 1, 2, and 3, therefore, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. And one thing that I would like for you to do is get into your head. When Paul says, because of our Christianity, because we're a part of the family of God, we walk worthily. What he's saying when he says walk is live your life in this way. This is how I want you to live. You'll see the walking, verse 17. He says that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles. In chapter 5 and verse 2, he says that we're supposed to walk in love. In verse 8, he says that we walk as children of light. In verse 15, he says, look carefully how you walk. And so the title for this lesson, I think, comes from the orange above me right there, that we are to walk in a worthy manner of the calling with which we have been called. And instead of throwing up a PowerPoint, I've got 21 things on my list here. I think I'm only going to do 13. 21-point sermon, baby. Here we go. I think I'm only going to do 13. Don't worry. No, we'll move through it quick. Instead of clicking my clicker 13 times and saying, this is a thing, this is a thing, this is a thing, I'm just going to run through the text with you. And one of the coolest things from chapter 4 and verse 1, I think what we're going to do is we're probably going to go down to chapter 5 and verse 20. That's going to be our text. This, to me, is one of the coolest chunks of text in the Bible. I love it so much because now that you're a Christian, walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. And what this chunk of text is going to do is it's going to say, don't do this, stop doing these things, do this, start doing these things instead. 13 times. No, don't do that. And that's going to be red on the board. Yes, do that instead. And that's going to be green on the board. And I won't have a lot to say about every single one of these things. I mostly just want to show you this text. But I'll have a couple things to say about some of these things. So let's start in chapter 4. And let's start in verse 13, the second half, where it's yellow there on the screen. God has given us different people to teach us, apostles and prophets, and the different things that he's given us in order to equip us. And this is what we're doing when we get the word that God has given us. He says, to mature manhood, we're supposed to grow up. And as we grow up, the description is to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. So here I am, little baby Ryan, and God gives me the word, and my job is to grow as I have that word, and eventually I want to grow so that when I'm mature, I look like Christ. That's the goal. And so there's, don't do this instead. Number 1, he says in verse 14, so that we may no longer be children. And he describes a child. You know, you can convince a kid of anything. You could say, here, would you rather have a $100 bill or I have a Smartie in my pocket? You know, and they're like, ooh, give me the Smartie. They're gullible and naive, and they think in the moment. And what Paul is saying to the Ephesians is, stop being that. No longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, craftiness, deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up. Stop being children, instead grow up. And there's one thing that I want to do. Stick your marker. If you're not following on the screen, if you have your Bible in front of you, stick your marker right there in that text. I'm going to go over to 2 Timothy chapter 3. And I promise I won't do this with every single one of these 13 things, but this one especially is one that I think about a lot with growing up. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, starting in verse 1, Paul says, understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. People will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant. There's going to be all kinds of people who are not living the Christian way that they're supposed to live. In verse 5 he says, they have the appearance of godliness. They look like they're God's people and put on like they're doing right, but they deny its power. He says, avoid such people. And this is the one that I think of a lot with this point. Verse 6, among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins, led astray by various passions. Listen, always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that says. You know, I've been a Christian for 25 years, and, you know, here God has said this thing, and I just don't know. You know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I don't know. The first thing that Paul says to us is that we're not supposed to be children anymore. We're supposed to grow up. And so the ambiguity and the naivety, just believing everything that everybody says, all of those things we're supposed to grow up out of that. And so that can be worth spending just a minute on. And what I'm going to do in each one of these things is I would like for you to evaluate yourself. Every single person can grow in this lesson. And I want you to think about, if you are the exact same person with the exact same faith and the exact same amount of knowledge, and you live the exact same way as you were when you first became a Christian 5 years ago, you're not doing it right. We're not supposed to be little children all the time. We're supposed to grow and mature and learn and expand our faith and all of these different things. And so, number one, that's what we're supposed to do. Number two, in verse 22, chapter 4 and verse 22, put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life. And he talks about that a little bit in verse 24. Here's the alternative, to put on the new self. So what are you saying, Ryan? That I'm just supposed to change who I am? Yep. Yeah, that's right. Over time. Oh, that's really hard. So I've been in counseling classes and, psychology classes where people will say, it's impossible. And I've said that a lot to my kids especially. And I'll say it right now since I have an opportunity to a girl. If you're dating someone and he hits you, run and don't ever come back. You can love him and you can forgive him, but don't ever go back. And the reason why is because if he hits you now, he'll hit you later. Then they're not going to change. Well, wait a second, Ryan. People don't change. We don't change. We don't do that. We take our old self in Christianity and we put that old self to death. And we stop doing it, and we stop being it. And as we grow, we learn, we grow, we become a new person who looks like Christ. I'm going to go, this will probably only be the other time I do this, okay? So be patient with me. I love this story in Matthew chapter 12. I'm going to go over to Matthew chapter 12 on this one, because Jesus, I think, painted a picture. Sometimes it's hard to understand in this story, but he painted a picture that's really worth paying attention to and knowing. In Matthew chapter 12 and verse 43, Jesus said, when the unclean spirit has gone out of the person, so imagine me, I'm possessed by an unclean spirit, and that I did this, I put off the old self, the unclean spirit has left. And so what am I going to do? After he's left, he passes through waterless places, he seeks rest, but he finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. So God got rid of this unclean spirit out of my life, and I cleaned things up inside of me. But verse 45, he says, then it goes and it brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself. And they enter and they dwell there, and the second state will be worse than the first. And the picture is, yes, put off the old self, but don't just leave it empty. Don't just clean it up and leave it empty. You fill it in with other stuff. And so this lesson is not just, this is still kind of introduction level thinking. This lesson is not just stop doing these things. They're sinful and wrong and we shouldn't do them anymore. It's replace them with something good. Don't just stop being something and stop doing sinful things. Start being something new and replace it with other things. Verse 25. Put away falsehood, let each one of you speak truth to his neighbor. In John chapter 17 and verse 17, Jesus says, sanctify, that is, set them apart. Jesus prays to God about us. Set them apart in truth. Your word is truth. And so here's the thing. Christian friends, our job is to tell the world the truth. They don't like it, and they don't want to hear it, but that's our job. We don't tell them lies and pat them on the back and say everything is good and fine, because it's not. If you're not a Christian, your soul is lost. You are separated from God with no hope in this life or the next. and I'm not going to pretend and say otherwise. My job is to tell you the truth. In verse 26, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. The main theme on that one is to control yourself. And this is one, I'll tell you right now, I don't do this as much as I used to, so here is my growth, but I wish that it didn't still exist in this way. When I get mad at you, my wife or my kids or something like that, when I get mad, that emotional rush of madness, for me, only lasts about 25 seconds or so. But then I stay mad because I consciously think about it and want to be mad. I just like to do it. It doesn't make me happy. It doesn't change anything for the better in my life. But I'll sit like this sometimes for days because I'm choosing to do it because I want to. And what Paul is saying here is stop that nonsense. Control yourself and get over it and move on with your life. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Maybe this is the one, like maybe you're like me and this is the one where you're like, oh yeah, that's mine. That's the one out of the 13 that I'm going to be thinking about this week. Verse 28, don't steal anymore. Instead, I like this one a lot. Instead, work with your hands, but I'm not going to take from you. I'm going to work. Why? So that I have something to share. So I'm not going to take, I'm going to give. Don't be a taker, be a giver. Verse 29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good. And there's two things. The thing that I like so much about Ephesians is, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth. And so in my head, I've got something in mind, like bad language. And that's probably true. It's included in this. But the opposite of don't let corrupting talk come out of my mouth. The opposite is, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build you up. And not only am I going to build up, I'm going to give grace to those who hear. And so that helps to shine some light, I think, on what the corrupting talk is. The corrupting talk is things that tear down and take away from God's grace. Instead, build up and offer grace to those who would hear. Verse 31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. If you are a bitter and angry person, stop it. Verse 32, this is what we do instead. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. In verse 3 of chapter 5, let sexual immorality, impurity, covetousness not even be named among you. In 2024, he would have said, not be found in your browser history on your phone or your iPad or your computer. It's not even in our orbit or our scope of thinking. Now, this one is awesome. What is the alternative to let not these sexual sins and temptations be even named in my life? We don't even talk about it. What's the alternative? To be a thankful person. Isn't that something? Is that what you would have thought of? What's the opposite of sexual immorality? Gratitude. But listen, men, especially on this one, God is telling us what to do and how to do it. When you feel the pull of temptation and you start to walk down that road, stop and focus on what you're thankful for. I'm thankful that God has given me a wife. I'm thankful that God has given me self-control. I'm thankful that God has given me whatever, and that gratitude overwhelms any desire to sin. Verse 6, let no one deceive you with empty words. We kind of talked about that one already. Oh no, but he deceived me, he tricked me, he led me astray. It is your responsibility to not be deceived. God has thrown that ball in my court. We're not allowed to be gullible people. God specifically said, do not be deceived. Instead, we are to be the light in the Lord. In verse 11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness. Instead, expose them. That doesn't mean walking around saying, that's evil, you're bad, you're going to hell. But rather than taking part in the darkness and the sin that is so much a part of our world, my job is to live different and separate from that so that it exposes the darkness from what it is. And I don't shine my light on it. We are to shine the light that God has given us in Christ on that. So don't do it, rather expose them. Verse 15, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Be shrewd as serpents. Verse 17, do not be foolish, rather understand what the will of the Lord is. This is one that really caught my attention. I thought about it a lot walking my dog this week. But understand what the will of the Lord is. One thing that I've said, and I'm hoping, I think this a lot about life, you know. Why does everything have to be so hard? I look at someone like Ed. Someone, random, anonymous person. I look at someone like Ed, and in my way of thinking, you know, he's just got it all figured out. He knows what the right thing to do is. He always does it. It's there. And I look at my life, and it's like every single day is like a Leave It to Beaver episode where there's some challenge that I have to overcome in my life, you know, to get on. And it's like, why does everything have to be so hard? And the idea is, as we grow, this is what Paul says in Romans chapter 12 and verses 1 and 2. As we grow, what is supposed to happen is that I'm able to see more clearly the right thing and where I'm supposed to go versus the wrong thing and what I'm not supposed to do. He says, do not be foolish, but rather as we grow, to understand what the will of the Lord is. In verse 18, this is the last one. Fastest 13-point sermon you've ever had in your life. Verse 18, do not get drunk with wine. The idea of don't get drunk with wine is why you drive down the road and you see a store that's called, Manchester. I don't know if this is one, but it's called Wine and Spirits. And wine and alcohol is called spirits because when people drink a lot of it, they start to act a certain way. And if you don't understand about alcohol affecting the mind and the brain, you might think that this person has been possessed by something evil, you know. And so don't get drunk with wine and live as if you're being controlled by these other forces. Rather, the alternative to that is be filled with the Spirit. Ephesians and Colossians are very similar to one another, and the Colossian letter talks about this idea. It says, don't get drunk with wine. Rather, instead of be filled with the Spirit, it says, let the word of Christ dwell in you. Live not as if you're controlled by some outside force. Live as if you are controlled by the word and the Spirit of God. That's what drives and motivates and directs us. And then this is, I told you I had 21 on my notes up here. 15 through 21 is, now that you're a Christian, there are other parts of our life that should be changed too. We submit to one another, which is an incredible thing to think about. Because you know the joke about the plane that goes down with all these people, you know, and there's like an east side of the island Church of Christ and a west side island Church of Christ because the east side and the west side can't get along with one another. And the joke that I heard, it's one guy stranded on a deserted island and people show up to rescue him and he's like, this is where I go to church. And they said, what's that over there? And he said, that's where I used to go to church. You know, I can't even get along with myself sometimes. One of the things about being a Christian is that we submit to one another, which is an incredible feature, given that when you look throughout history, you have a record of Christians not getting along with each other and submitting to one another. That is not the way of God in Christ. Wives, this is how you behave. Husbands, this is how you behave. Children, this is how you behave. Fathers, don't provoke your children. Servants, this is how you behave. And masters, don't be a jerk to those servants. And so this is a really cool section of text. I moved through it really fast, But I sent out an email the other day, and I'll send it again if you like, of just that. It's printed out with the colors. And the thing that I would really like for you to do, if I could have one ask, this is what I'd like for you to do. Now that you're thinking Ephesians 4 and 5, don't do this, put off that way of life. Do this instead, put on this way of life. Would you please go back through that text and read it and think about it? And I think, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just find one thing. Just find one thing in that list that speaks to you that you need to stop doing this week or that you need to start doing this week. And if we all look through that list and we just find one thing to do better on this week, we'll be better off for it. Let me go back so we can sing our songs. I think you want to go ahead to the songs. I'm done. For the rest of our time this morning, we're going to sing 3 or 4 songs. I don't remember. 4 songs. And the 4 songs that we're going to sing are going to be talking about how we walk. And it's this: walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. If you're here today and you're not a Christian, everybody starts by crawling. And if you want to start being a Christian, and this is the way we'll say it today, if you want to start your walk with God through Christ today, and you know what to do in order to get started on that, or you want to talk about that, if we can help you with that this morning, come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.